I'm going to tell you about the Bridges Coalition, the UNESCO-MOST BRIDGES Coalition. And the story of the Bridges Coalition begins in 2015, when the Paris Agreement was being finalized, when UN Agenda 2030 was being finalized, and the Sustainable Development Goals were being agreed to by all the member states. And in tandem with that, I'm having some difficulties advancing my slides. In tandem with that, UNESCO decided to start a project called Broadening the Application of the Sustainability Science Approach. This was a 2-year project that was intended to look at the field of sustainability science as it had moved out of the Millennium Goals and the Millennium Project at the turn of the century. And it had been 15 years in order to make recommendations on how the field of sustainability science could be optimized to help member states that had agreed to the Paris, or were in the process of agreeing to the Paris Agreement and to the SDGs, how they could better meet their commitments. So they began this 2-year process with several workshops that moved around from Paris and UNESCO headquarters to Malaysia. And I had the opportunity to join into that project. It was funded by the government of Japan. And it produced a report or an outcome document called the Guidelines on Sustainability Science in Research and Education. And in that document, a number of recommendations were made about how the field of sustainability science could be better supported and how it could develop to meet the challenges that countries were facing now and would be facing in trying to live up to their obligations of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And we're halfway through that period now, the goal of 2030, and we're not doing a very good job at it, by the way. We're lagging very much behind. And so there's a deep sense that it's crucial to find new capacities, new capabilities and modalities that can help us to achieve these goals, because those goals are not arbitrary, they're not picked at random, they're informed by science. And we know that we're going to be passing certain crucial planetary boundaries if we're unable to meet these goals, and that it will be more and more difficult down the line for future generations, and even during the lifetimes of present generations, for people if they cannot actually get the climate crisis and the poly crisis under control, because we know it's linked to biodiversity and a number of other crises that are actually sort of central in our view right now. So coming out of that project, one of the things that those guidelines did was they recommended that the arts, the educational sciences, the qualitative social sciences, and importantly, the humanities as well, needed to be integrated more effectively into mainstream sustainability science. So they used this document that was produced to begin discussions with UNESCO member states through UNESCO commissions at national level to hopefully affect the conversation about how sustainability science could be better supported at national level. But it was still a very top-down, sort of policy-oriented and science policy-oriented conversation. A number of the stakeholders that had been part of that project that produced the guidelines of sustainability science and education met and followed up, led by, in fact, UNESCO, but also by CIPSH, which is the International Council for Philosophy and Human Sciences, and the Circumpolar Observatory of the Humanities for the Environment Global Observatory Network. And that's how I came into the work, because I lead the Circumpolar Observatory based in Iceland. And Humanities for the Environment is a network of observatory groups around the world, with 8 observatories presently in most of the regions of the world, that bring together humanists, that bring together humanities scholars, and work to actually make the knowledge from this community more accessible and more actionable within sort of the sustainability sphere. So what happened then was that a new project began or was formulated in 2019 and began in 2020 with a series of 4 more workshops. And a number of stakeholders were brought together for this project. 40 or so different member organizations, or they would become member organizations, met at UNESCO headquarters, met in Portugal at the Institute of the Polytechnic Institute of Tamar and the Research Center in Missão, Portugal, at the Sigtuna Foundation in Sweden, and finally at Cappadocia University, though they hosted the 4th workshop, but it was during the pandemic, so that was an online workshop. And as a result of this, a new instrument or a new organ was foreseen that would be the Bridges Coalition, that would bring together diverse stakeholders from knowledge institutions, academic institutions, but also from civil society and from other kinds of entities that sometimes fell outside of mainstream sustainability science, that fell outside of mainstream science policy work, like indigenous peoples as well. So I'll let this run for a moment to give you a sense of how we framed it at the time. This little promotional video was put together for our 3rd workshop in that 2-year process that ran during 2020 and 2021 and culminated with a proposal to the Management of Social Transformations program, which is an international science program led within UNESCO and the only one based wholly in the social and human sciences. And which is also, incidentally, an intergovernmental council made up of 35 member states. And as part of that proposal, we proposed that a new instrument, a new coalition would be formed that would be programmatic in its nature and that could draw together the diverse kind of stakeholders that had been part of the visioning process. And they're everything from large global organizations like ICOMOS, the International Council on Monuments and Sites, the International Science Council, the Club of Rome, Future Earth, the World Academy of Art and Science, to smaller organizations of more regional and local orientation, including indigenous communities. And what we saw as being necessary is a way of advancing this bridging work that would more successfully bring in knowledge communities that had not been part of mainstream sustainability science before, was being able to have all of these stakeholders, large and smaller, but with a key sort of engagement and a sense of mission and duty and real capabilities that they could be bringing to the table and sharing with one another. We saw it as necessary that these different entities could be sitting at the same table, working together on solutions. And so this is just a little bit of an overview. You can see that they're from countries from all over the world. And these were the original 40 or so members that formed Bridges and that are now the charter members of the Bridges Coalition. Bridges Coalition now has been going and has been operational and has had implementation capacity, let's say, for the past year to a year and a half. And we're in what we're calling the transitional getting start phase, I guess you could call it. And we have hubs based at Arizona State University. We have an international secretariat and a UK hub based at the University of Wales, Trinity St. David. Princeton University and CUNY in New York share a thematic hub. The University of Pretoria in South Africa also sponsors a hub at its campus in Pretoria. And then we also have the Club of Rome, a non-academic institution, but an organization that is a global think tank with its own very significant capacity that is also bridging in terms of the different kind of stakeholders that are involved in the Club of Rome. And then most recently, beginning right around now, we have a new hub beginning at the University of Cologne that is joining. And this is seen as part of a process whereby we expect within the next couple of years to have more than double the original number of hubs, especially in regions around the world where we haven't had hubs or we don't have them now. In Asia, in South America, we have proposals being prepared right now from Uruguay, discussions in development with stakeholders and significant institutions in Japan and organizations in Japan and China, and in the Middle East as well, and in Kenya. I saw that there were a number of people at this meeting from Kenya. The idea is that we're going to augment the original group of hubs. These are just some photos taken from the launch of the different hubs that took place a little over a year ago, from Wales and ASU in this case. What Bridges is all about and what Bridges is working to do is within the UN system, working to build robust and transformative communities of knowledge, purpose, and action. And promoting through undertaking a wide range of activities with high-level partners, with regional, more local partners, different activities that actually can move the needle and on how we can have more inclusive, more equitable representation of knowledge communities that don't have a strong track record of integrating with strong academic institutions and natural science-driven sciences. So that's the idea behind Bridges, that we're bringing qualitative social sciences, the humanities, the arts, and educational sciences, as well as other knowledge communities, indigenous knowledge communities, indigenous science, we can even call it, and the knowledge from stakeholders, including youth, including other marginalized peoples who have very significant local knowledge, who have very specific profession-based knowledge. We're very interested in finding ways to create greater sharing and collaboration across divides where you don't often find a lot of these entities at the same table. So I'll just really quickly run through an example of some of the things that we've undertaken in the last year to advance this initiative. One of them is collaboration on Future Earth's Pathways Forum series. Future Earth sponsors a series of webinars every year called the Pathways Forum that's about advancing sustainability science in different ways and approaching it from different angles. And a couple of these a year, we do a team up with Future Earth where we're bringing the social and human sciences dimension, as well as knowledge from other non-academic knowledge communities and action capacities from communities outside of the academic mainstream into these discussions as well. And we host a couple of webinars. So you can go to the Future Earth website for Pathways Forum and find the webinars, the videos for the webinars archived there. We just had one a few weeks ago focused on climate litigation, where we were looking at the state of climate litigation around the world and how this transects many different communities, from the legal practitioner community, from the courts and lawyers and so forth, to academic communities that involve both climate scientists and philosophers and ethicists, to activist communities, small communities that are actually stepping up, and the ones who are actually leading the charge, often with youth at the center of these cases, on trying to get governments to meet their obligations according to the agreements that they themselves have committed to, but which they don't have a really great track record so far of meeting. And so that's often what these climate litigation cases are about. And so we had a Pathways Forum that looked at that. Last year at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, we sponsored, together with Future Earth, but also with ASU Global Futures Laboratory, some events, including, and we had one as well focused on, for instance, how we can draw upon local knowledge to better prepare communities for dealing with the situation of devastating wildfires. In Portugal, wildfires have just been absolutely devastating on communities in central Portugal. And there have been sort of place-based and community-based approaches that are a bit off the charts or a bit different from the mainstream approach to these. And we wanted to highlight how these communities were themselves taking the lead and formulating new approaches to how wildfires could be prevented or mitigated in their region based upon local solutions that were really, really ground up, that were really, really grassroots based, but that also involved municipalities working together with landowners to working together with other stakeholders. So that was one that we did at COP27. We did one together with some people we're going to hear about after my presentation, Vetislava, and we're going to hear about the Turn It Around project, which was in one of our sessions devoted to the role of youth and gender and indigenous communities, specifically in the Pacific, but where we brought in some cases also from the circumpolar north as part of the Bridges contribution to this session. And this is an example of one of the ones we brought in from the circumpolar north, focused on Alaska, indigenous communities in Alaska, and the link between heritage and climate change and vulnerable heritage as a result of what's going on with environmental change. So these are just a few examples. We're also working with the Earth League, with the Global Futures Laboratory at ASU, together with their international partners, on the 10 must-haves initiative and the 10 must-dos initiative, which is seen as another approach to complement the SDGs. Heidi pointed out, I think rightfully, that the SDGs are not perfect. They have their limitations, and the 10 must-have and 10 must-dos initiative is one of several complementary efforts that are actually being undertaken to see how we can better sort of fill in or be more successful where the SDGs are not entirely successful, or where they can't be because of the limitations of how they were framed to begin with. Finally, or almost finally, I'll just mention that we have developed working relations with the Learning Planet Institute, with, I mentioned the Earth League, but also the Commissioner for the Well-Being of Future Generations in Wales, the first position of its sort from a national position that is politically independent, that actually tries to take a look carefully at how public entities actually can actually be living up to the SDGs. And we're together with Learning Planet Institute in particular. Last year we partnered with them and had 6 different events at the Learning Planet Festival, which happens at the end of January every year. And together with some of our member organizations, or like the Club of Rome that sponsors a hub, we did something together with the Learning Planet Institute that introduced Bridges there then, because it was very new at that point. But we also looked at, again, different approaches to youth-led climate action, for instance, in the Arab region, in European youth, and reports that came out last year looking at specifically the state of young people and their sense of agency and empowerment, and their views about their future in regard to climate change. And so we had this really interesting session devoted to that at last year's Learning Planet Festival. We worked with anthropologists who were taking a look at how we could actually think differently in terms of the language that nature speaks, and how we could actually draw on that in fashioning maybe more effective action capacities and political approaches to climate change and environmental change. We looked at the case of the Kogi people in Colombia, and how their approach to indigenous knowledge, indigenous science, is being developed as an alternative to mainstream Western science, and where they're trying to renew the water systems in their own lands and repair the damages that are occurring in the world right now. We looked at future backcasting experience and looking at examples based on, for instance, the idea of the ministry of the future. What would a successful future look like by placing ourselves through an imaginative act into the situation of being at 2050 already, and we've already been successful. Well, what do we do to get there? So we begin to do some imaginative experiments and thought experiments like that. That was one of the sessions. The Penn Program in Environmental Humanities, which is a member institution at University of Pennsylvania of the Bridges Coalition. They shared their My Climate Story project at Learning Planet Festival, which is a really powerful project among several that they're running there, that are looking at futures beyond refineries, for instance, and other approaches to what we need to do to actually be able to come to terms with the climate crisis and leave a habitable planet for the future. Beyond these, what I would say is that we've done other things focused with WASS, the World Academy of Art and Science, on youth-led knowledge and education for climate change and human security. And you can see once again, Iveta Silova, who's coming on after me, was in that session as well. And we were taking a look based upon some of the work we had done with the UNESCO reports and the European reports on youth and climate action, and brought in the Turn It Around report. And I think Iveta will probably say something about Turn It Around, so I won't step on her toes here. Finally, I want to flag up the fact that with Iveta, again, she's not listed here. You don't see her among those speakers, but she is one of them. So I have to bug Iveta to get her bio up in the Learning Planet Institute website. On the 26th of January, we're going to have an event where we're actually looking at poetry and how poetry can be mobilized both for learning potentials and learning capacities, but also the instilling of agency through opening up new expressive possibilities towards that move beyond the technocratic language of policy, that move beyond scientific language, and open up new senses of agencies and new appreciations, not only for the environment, not only for nature, but how human beings and human communities can live more harmoniously with nature. This is going to be part of this. So we're going to have a big poetry-based event at the Learning Planet Institute. And that's the one thing that we're partnering with LPI on this year, and really looking forward to. That will be taking place at Learning Planet Institute in Paris on the 26th. But it will also be streamed live. So we hope people here will choose maybe to follow that and see what approaches that we're going to be trying to promote in that event. These are just some examples from the last year of different groups. This is the minister, or rather the commissioner for the well-being of future generations on the right with me, and with my acting deputy executive director from Bridges, Lucy Atala in Wales. We then had an opportunity to meet up again with the commissioner and his team in New York during the UN General Assembly in the fall, to follow through on how we could begin preparing and thinking about aiming towards certain landmark things that are going to be happening in 2024 with the Summit of the Future, with the 100-year anniversary of the rights of the child, with an updating of UNESCO's in tandem with outcome documents of the Pact of the Future for the UN. Summit of the Future will be producing a pact for the future, but also UNESCO is in the process of updating its own guidelines or its declaration on the obligations to future generations. And so we met with the Assistant Director General in UNESCO for that. And we have a meeting coming up this coming week, and we're following through with a number of activities to see how we can actually bring these to bear more effectively during this year, where there's going to be some really monumental things happening. And educational capacities are necessary for all of these. I can't emphasize enough how education is perhaps one of the areas in which the most can actually be realized at different levels. If we're thinking specifically as well beyond education, beyond just formal education, beyond higher education, education at all levels, education from primary education, preschool, to secondary education, through tertiary education, but also informal education. So I think it's worth thinking about and talking a little bit more about how can informal and formal education and other kinds of learning systems be more effectively deployed and integrated with one another to be helping us meet the obligations that we know we have to meet. There are methodological dimensions to this. There are content-related dimensions to this. So these are the things that we've been discussing with our colleagues at Learning Planet Institute, with the World Academy of Art and Science, with Globe Ethics, and we're having similar discussions in China and Japan, especially anticipating having stronger anchoring of bridges in Japan and China and in the Pacific Asia region in the future. That was the Research Institute for Humanity and Nature, with whom we've had some very productive conversations in the last few months. So I'm a little worried. I think I've gone over my time, especially since that 4-minute delay just trying to get my PowerPoint to work. So I'm going to stop there, but there's a few more things I'm in a position maybe to elaborate on. And what I want to really make clear is that the Bridges Coalition is interested in identifying partners who are as serious as we are about bridging different communities, different action and knowledge communities. This was at last year's MOST Forum and the Intergovernmental Council of the Management of Social Transformations program, where we had a Bridges event as well. And we're going to have one coming up this year as well in April this year. And I won't share the links right now, but I do really want to emphasize that our approach is how can we actually target those areas that have not successfully been included as successfully in the past, and begin to bring them in through different measures that can allow us to build new structures that, in the process of building those structures, can help us not only to more effectively make the most of different systems that already exist, different organs that already exist, but renew them and create new structures, because I think we're going to really need to do that to be able to come to terms with the climate and the poly crisis that we're facing.